Carlton King is a former Scotland Yard Special Branch and MI6 officer and the author of Black Ops.
I was undercover for Special Branch in jihadi organisation.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe for free.
My name is Carlton King, and welcome to the Black Spy Podcast, the show that shines a light on the world of secret intelligence, national security, and armed governmental personal protection operations, but actually often measures on what I call the geopolitical life. So geopolitics, the whole thing around us, how it works, what the connections are, what happens in our name, and what the systems do either to us or behind our backs. And also how people think, how people are orientated to think. So once again, in order to do this, I've got my, can I now say this, trusted sidekick, possible.
I was going with partner in crime.
Partner in crime, that's good enough to me. Fergus, Esack is back on the show. We should have had loud applause, etc., etc., etc. And we're going to talk about a subject which she wanted to speak about, which was what is the difference between the way the public see police, the cops in parlance, and spies, spooks in parlance. So what's the difference? Why are they perceived differently? Why is one, I hasten to add, I don't want to put anybody's mind in one way or the other, but why is one seemingly seen as totally negative and the other one seen as totally positive? And I'll let you guess which one is which. So Fergus, thanks very much for coming back on again.
Well, it's okay. So very often, Carlton, on these episodes, we chat and I've got my opinion, you've got your opinion, and we banter about this. But in this particular argument, in this particular discussion, you were probably one of the very few people in the world that's been on both sides of the fence.
Correct.
So what's interesting for me is the deconstruction on both sides to work out why. Now, look, from a media side, we can be really flippant here. Like, why are coppers, why are so many people afraid of the police, and why do so many people think spies are cool? Well, to be honest, we could be really, really flippant. Like, the short answer is 2 words and 3 letters, isn't it? Why spies are cool. Right? It's the old 007, isn't it? But yeah. But let's just look at this. I mean, let's just look at this from the police side first. Okay. So look, I just did a quick Google. Right now, I'm taking words. They're emotive words. They're accusational words, but I'm taking words that have been used in headlines, in media articles, to describe a police officer who's actually being convicted for a particular crime, right? So I'm not just plucking words out of the blue, right? But let's just have a look. And I like, this is just, to be honest, I mean, I literally just did a quick 10-minute Google, right? Audacious, corrupt, bent, liar, paedophile, murderer, killer, accomplice, womanizer, drug dealer, prime suspect, criminal. All right. Now, look, those are all very, very emotive words. Now, the media reported those words rightfully in those cases because those police officers were convicted of those particular offences. But what I think that your listeners don't understand, and this is where your insights come into play, is that what people don't understand is that to be an undercover agent, you know, you have to put yourself in the same space as those criminals. You know, you probably, you know, you might, out of those adjectives, you probably are lying you are lying every day, because you're under false pretenses. You're pretending to be who you are. You're definitely accomplice. Every day you're probably a criminal. You're probably corrupt. You might well be, you know, depending on at what level you're undercover, and if you're infiltrating terrorists or you're infiltrating, you know, something else. I mean, you know this better than me, and hopefully you can vocalize this in a way that you know, that you're comfortable doing. But I know that one thing that I never knew until I met you was what being undercover actually means. You know, it's not going out in a black, you know, it's not going out in a casino, to a casino in a tuxedo and jumping off Tower Bridge and being rescued by a helicopter or whatever. It's very different, right?
So what you're asking me now? So first and foremost, we'll get some language right, because what we always like to do, as you know, on the show, is get the language correct. So we don't have somebody calling in or writing in or say whatever and saying, oh, this is rubbish, because they don't know what they're talking about. So when you said undercover agent, what you actually then were relating that to, I surmise, is one of the security or intelligence services. There are three in the United Kingdom. That's what you were talking about, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Why don't you talk us through?
Right. So, of course, you've got the security service, which is MI5, which carries in and does work on homegrown activities, so in the United Kingdom. Then you've got the Secret Intelligence Service, of which I was a member, which does work external generally, also can do some internal work, but generally external to the United Kingdom. And that is basically spying 9 times out of 10. And then you've got GCHQ, which is Government Communication Headquarters, which are the people who have pointy heads and deal with everything that has to do with communications, i.e. listening to this communication as we speak right now. Okay, to make sure we're not saying anything that we shouldn't be. So, you know, they're hacking everything and listening to everything that they can get access to. So those are your three sort of mainstream agencies. Now, in order to make this function in the United Kingdom, because in most countries, that security service, MI5, in Britain, security service, MI5, the external service, Secret Intelligence Service, MI6, because that security service in Britain is made up by civilians, okay, not the army, not anybody else, they're civilians who are hired for that role, with no police powers, so no powers of arrest, no powers to carry firearms, etc., etc. What you need in Britain also is a police body that carries out that role in a similar way. So that's why they had in the past particularly the Metropolitan Police Special Branch, which was Scotland Yard's special branch, which actually was formed before any of the other agencies. So for 125 years, Special Branch was doing the work as the only, as part of, firstly only until 1909, but then afterwards in tandem with the security service in Britain. So in France, in Spain, in Scandinavia, you can go on and on and on. That security service is a police body. So it doesn't need to have another body next to it because it's the police that do that, right? So this is how we had our difference in Britain. We split it up. So they work in tandem then because, you know, you've got a spy, you're looking at a spy from another country in Britain, but you haven't got the powers to arrest that spy. So you need the police to do it, and the body that did that was the Special Branch, and now it's the Counter-Terrorism Command. But I mean, it's a very bad way of putting it because it just doesn't do terrorism; it does other things. I know it doesn't do as wide as what Special Branch used to do when it carried out its own work, but that's the thing. So what I'm going to say is they're not agents; they're all called officers, be they in MI5, MI6, or GCHQ or in the police. Everybody is called officer. What we get mixed up with is We call people agents because that's what the Americans call them. And because we watch American TV, it's an FBI agent. It's a NCS agent. It's they call them agents. Funnily enough, with the exception of CIA, and you'll see on a lot of programs they say a CIA agent, they don't call them agents. They call them officers like we do. Why? A bit of history coming through, because the British helped form the CIA. Because during the Second World War,
that's interesting.
Yeah, they watched what we were doing in SIS, Secret Intelligence Service, because they had a unit called the OSS, right? And that unit then changed and morphed into the CIA in 47, and it used then the British system. So they're called officers. They're not agents. But everybody else in the US system is generally an agent. Right, now, what do we call agents? And this is where the mix-up comes. We call agents here in Britain people who, in the secret world, secret security world, secret intelligence world, when Special Branch was dealing with it, whomever, we call agents the people we have turned who provide us with secret intelligence, who provide us with information. They are our agents. We don't call them informants in Britain. Right? Police in Britain, general police, call them informants. But in the Special Branch domain, or which is now Counter-Terrorism Command, they're called agents. Right? That's the difference. So that's a little bit of history for you there as to how and why that is different.
All right. So again, just in the interest of educating your audience here, you moved from the police into MI6, but what's the normal career path of someone entering MI6?
Right. Okay. In the old days, let's go back in the old days. And this is why I think there is a difference. And you can tell me this. And this is why I love having you on the show. In the old days, I'll tell you how that happened in the old days. You were in Oxford, Cambridge, St Andrews, Durham. Let's say, Imperial College. Yeah, that's probably about it.
If they couldn't find their spy quota for the
Russell Group,
recruitment fair.
And some guy would turn up, not even a recruitment fair. Some guy would turn up who was the individual whom the service had recruited as.
I'm just gonna say I would love the like the concept of like a man in black rocking up to like the milk round at university on campus and being like,
no, hey, what he was your lecturer. He was your lecturer. It was they were the lecturers. So the lecturers saw there was something in there. They were the lecturers that were connected, and then they'd say, listen, we've got a guy or a gal who we think will fit well, and this is all we think they'll fit well. Yeah. And they'd get a knock on the shoulder. Have you ever thought about working for your country? Yeah. Boom, 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 boom. That's the way it used to go. And that's reality. That's not a joke. That is how it happened. So that's when, and what you got to realise, sorry, I should explain that, until 1987, no, rubbish, 1995, I think is the act. I think it's 95 is the act. Could be 97. Don't quote me on it, one or the other. The Intelligence Services Act, yeah, I mean, you can look it up. When that came out, that then made these services open. Because up until that time, these services, MI5, I'm just using the code names out, MI5, MI6, GCHQ, did not exist. So they were non-existent.
So I know obviously I know the answer to this, but like for the benefit of your listeners, so how on earth did they let you in then?
So in my case, it was a little bit different, Fergus. What happened is that they were looking for, that is MI6, the Secret Intelligence Service, were looking for an individual who had knowledge of the terrorist matters. In the first instance, they were looking for sort of Palestinian-esque, that sort of area, and I had great expertise in that area, but also in any other type of terrorism. So what happened was, as you know, I was an MPSB officer, and as an MPMB officer, what we did is we look at terrorism from the perspective of national security. So we're, in fact, stopping the terrorists from carrying out actions in the United Kingdom. And obviously, if it's elsewhere, connecting with our colleagues in Europe and beyond to explain to them. So the service has said, listen, we could do with some expertise in this area. Do you have individuals with that? And there wasn't just me as a DI, there was other DIs who had various other expertise in the field of terror. And so they had a selection process for us to join into the service. And I went through that selection process and basically passed it to join the service as a case officer. I should explain that because that's quite important. We had police who do work with the service with MI6 in police matters, because there's some things that they assist with when it has to do with crime. So primarily you could think about drugs. So you've got police who do some connection with that, but this is not a police area where police have primacy. Obviously, police have primacy on crime. So this is not a police area. So they were looking for a case officer. Now, a case officer, to describe him the best, is the guy who does the James Bond role, or the gal who does the James Bond role, and their job is to, at the behest of the United Kingdom government, defeat, the enemies of the UK. So they're the ones who organise all of these processes in order to make that happen, and number one, to recruit agents. So the number one thing is agent recruitment, and I've explained what an agent is. It's secret agents, so people with secret knowledge that you couldn't get anywhere else, who were 9 times out of 10 part of the enemy, be that an enemy state, or in this case, be it an enemy terrorist. So you basically want a fella who is a terrorist already, and you want to, or a woman, and you want to turn that person so they work for you. But unfortunately, it's a highly precarious area, because if they got captured working for you, they will lose their life. It's that simple. And potentially their families will lose their lives because it's terror. So that's the way it works in that sort of game. And if they're smart, what the organisation would do is entice the officer, in this case me, who's running the agent, out to somewhere where they can grab him or her. And then ideally they would want to debrief that officer about everything they know about their organisation, and then you'd basically be executed on the internet in a yellow jumpsuit or something. So it's a precarious situation, and you've got to understand who your agent is and who you're dealing with and why they've agreed to be recruited, etc., etc., etc. So that's mine. But as I explained earlier, a little bit earlier on, the traditional mode was to be hit on the shoulder by basically a lecturer, a very senior lecturer often, who is connected in some way to the service because they asked them to talent scout. And then those case officers were chosen from there. Now, for non-case officers, so a case officer would be somebody who would, if he would, in the normal Foreign Office, he'd be ambassador material, or she would be ambassador material. So for people down from that, so specialists, they may be computer specialists, they may be, even doctorates, but specialising in language, specialising in tactical estimate, could be anything. Could be a locksmith even. Those people are recruited, again, just in a different manner. Totally normal in a different manner. And then you've got administrative individuals who were recruited in a different manner as well, from red brick universities recruited normally. Now, all that's changed. And basically they now have, as you mentioned before, jobs fairs. Not necessarily saying what it is. Sometimes they now do say what it is, and they request if you want to join the service. And then you would be streamed into either the top stream, which was in my day, it was called the intelligence branch, IB. So case officers were from the intelligence branch. Then you drop down to the executive branch, and then you had the specialist branch. So as I said, the specialists were linguists, whatever. But the top of that pinnacle was the IB, the intelligence branch officers, case officers, who carried out all the work.
So that's that. That's basically how it worked. And I was a guy who had what was required because of all the things I'd done, not just because I'd done a lot of other kind of stuff as well, which I won't speak about, which allowed me to understand how to function in natural cover. So that was that. Yeah.
Okay, so like, look, just to give a bit more colour to this, if you're going undercover as an agent in whatever capacity to do whatever job, so what happens? You get a fake name, do you? You get a fake passport?
Okay, so what you're now talking about is, again, you're an officer, and you love to say agent because I know that's jumped into you. You're an officer, not an agent. The agent you have recruited is in their own name doing what they are doing because they are an actual person doing the actual job. They are a terrorist, or they are an intelligence officer in another organization that you've turned to work for you. You know, like the famous Soviet officers we turned in the past. Oleg Ganovsky example, who we turned, people like that. Skripal, who we turned, he was a Soviet GRU officer. We had turned him, and he was working for us, a double agent, right? So these people are, obviously their own countries don't know about it because spying is obviously an offence in every country you want to talk about. And if you get captured in some, like in the United States, you can be executed. It's as simple as. And obviously in Russia, you could be executed. Now, Skripal, as you know, was found. He didn't get executed. They put him on trial, and they put him on trial for many, they imprisoned him for many years. And what happened with him, Skripal, was that they exchanged him for some agents that were in the US, Soviet agents, or people they had turned in the US, and they exchanged him for them. So that's how that worked. So they are who they are. Now, when you talk about the officer now, so me, yes, you get different identities. You get, you can have multiple different identities, depending on what the job was. I mean, I had several different jobs running at the same time to do with terrorism in many different places and many different organizations. And for each of them, I would have had a different name, a different passport, a different legend, as we call it. That is what you were doing and why you were doing it when you went to foreign lands. So yes, you do. You have all of that. All that James Bond stuff you want to see, all that's true.
So, okay, I'm going to ask you a really stupid question because, I have the opportunity, right? So all the things that everybody wants to know, right? You've obviously just been ill recently. So what happens if you're undercover and you need to go to hospital, or you have a dental emergency?
Right. No, that's interesting. Okay, the longest, you see, if you're doing right. So this is different. So you talk about MI6 now. So if we now go back to the special branch, that is where you will be doing really, 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 really long-term stuff. You don't really do that in I'll say MI6. We call it SIS, the Secret Intelligence Service. But in MI6, you don't really do really long-term stuff where you're the, because I could go to a country, and be a guy for a week, right, and then keep going back at different times. Sort of week here, week there, and I could then do a different job at the same time because I've got several jobs running at the same time. So I might be in one country doing one set of things, in another country doing another set of things, another country doing another set of things, and that might all be happening at the same time, but it may not be long term. The long term you're talking about was more when I was in the special branch, which is, and that's the sort of jobs that they do, where you get long term work. Long term work. I'm talking years. Okay, so that's a different kettle of fish, completely different.
Right. Okay. So look, we started off this conversation talking about the media perception of the, I don't know, let's call it the corruption and abuse of power within the Met.
Yes.
Versus the kind of sexy black
type, straightforward. Yes.
Like perception of MI6, right?
Yes.
What if you were in one of those long-term undercover jobs, what kind of crimes would be, you know, what kind of things would just be par for the course? What sort of things would they would be swept under the carpet?
Right. Well, nothing swept under the carpet. Right. If
or
first thing,
for,
yeah, I know what you're saying.
Sorry, you know, sorry, actually, you know, I had to do this to not blow my cover.
Right. Yes. Okay. Very good. First thing you need to understand is that the special branch was the only body doing this thing in the United Kingdom. And the special branch only dealt with political offences. Now, it doesn't need to be an offence. It can be, look, the primary objectives of an efficient police, right, is prevention and detection of crime, right? So that is 1829, when the police was first formed. That was what they first told Parliament and what every police officer learned in the Metropolitan Police by heart. The primary objective of the efficient police is the prevention and detection of crime. Okay, so that means that before you're talking about actually catching criminals, you're talking about preventing it. That's the first thing. So it doesn't need to be a crime. You just need to be preventing a crime. Now you're looking at what the special branch work is, and it's about political offences. So that means then that, example, if you are planning to overthrow the government by non-parliamentary means, okay, that's called subversion, and it is an offence, right? So it may not be, if you're part of an organisation that aims to do that, then they are committing an offence. Okay.
Regular
police officers aren't going to deal with that.
Really, just in really basic terms, right? Just like really basic terms. Like, if you were, let's say, undercover to infiltrate a drugs ring, okay, that capacity,
that's general duty policing. That's not special branch work.
Okay. That's
general duty policing. So there are officers who are doing that. They do not do it. There's a body called SO10, right? SO10, and that body did undercover work for everything that was not special branch work, but they're generally short term, and it was looking at capturing people carrying out crimes.
Right. So if you're in SO10 and yes, you know, is it a crime if you take drugs whilst trying to identify the drug dealers?
Right. What happens is, in that circumstance, they will already have known, already be looking at individuals whom they think are involved in that type of criminality. Right. They will then introduce what they call a UC, the undercover officer, to actually buy drugs from them or be part of them or work in the investigation with them or whatever it might be, right, as a person who is involved in drugs, who is involved in a drugs gang. So that would be your cover, and you'd be working that, and you might work that for 1 week, 1 month to maybe 3 months, something like that. You might work that, and you'd get to work that, but everything you were doing in that is all recorded, all set down, all put in place, because you know at the end of the day that is going to court. There's no point you being there if you're not going to bring the case to court, because it's a criminal offence. So they're going through criminal procedures. Right. So it's all signed up for criminal work. Now, it may be that you have to do some stuff whilst you're there with them. So take drugs, example. But you would try to not do that, to ameliorate that and not take part in it, because all of it is evidential. It's called evidential. So it's going to court. Right. In the special branch, doing that type of work you're talking about, it was not going to court. The aim was not to bring people in front of a court. The aim was to find out what these people are trying to do. That could be in terms of terror, in terms of extremism, whatever, to find out what they're doing and to prevent the processes from happening. So let's go with the right way.
So who are you accountable to then? Who are you accountable to in that situation?
You're accountable in exactly the same way to the state. So the Home Office would say, these are the organisations which we think are dangerous. Let's say the BNP, example. right? The BNP is a dangerous organisation. It's attempting to cause fizzes within the society of the United Kingdom, right? It wants to cause race wars. Some people in there may even want to blow folk up, etc., etc., etc. Right. So your aim would be, in that sense, would be to be part of that group for whatever period of time, and to provide information that would be preventing those actions as time went on and collating everything that they were doing. In the other direction, it could be that you're in a left-wing group. And of course, you've got to think about it, most of the time that we've been, up to the 90s, most of the time that we've been living since 1945, we've been in a Cold War. We've been in a war against the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact. So many of these left-wing organizations were receiving funding from the Soviet Union or the Warsaw Pact or some other body. So in the miners' strike example, they got monies from Libya. They got monies from some Eastern European Warsaw Pact countries in those days, because anything that undermined the United Kingdom's well-being was advantageous to those other bodies who were against us. And let's be absolutely truthful, we were doing it in the opposite direction. Okay, so we were trying to cause problems within those countries for them, right? So SIS would the CIA were trying to cause problems that would overthrow their governments, right? So this is a big game. And of course, the game was so big, as you know, that we were willing to kill hundreds of millions of people, if not billion people, just to make sure one or the other of us won the Cold War, right? We had weapons of mass destruction there capable of destroying the whole world. So, let's contextualize this properly, right? So anything was fair game. Right? So those Eastern Bloc countries were trying to cause trouble and strife in the United Kingdom, and we were trying to cause trouble and strife in those Eastern Bloc countries and communist countries. So communists against non-communists, that was the battle. So obviously the priority was the left, but the right was also problematic, and it never stopped anybody from the right doing problems either. So, for example, the South Africans were supporting right-wing racists in Britain. Of course they were, because that was their perspective. So this is all a very big worldwide game that was being played, right? And the branch was in the middle of it, as was the security service, right? MI5.
Yeah, all right. So Carlton, okay, so let's imagine that you're undercover and you're in with the BNP, or you're in with an extreme left-wing gang or whatever. Like, how is there a line that you can't cross, or is it all fair game if it's part of the game, as it were, or part of the brief?
Well, how would you say a line? I mean, one of the biggest problems one of the biggest problems is people are human beings, right? And the biggest problem, of course, with all of this is human beings like other human beings. So, you may be in with the right wing, but actually you might find these guys great guys, right? So your biggest problem now is not being one of them. Okay?
Yeah, no, 100%, I get it.
This is where it falls down.
Okay,
this is where the whole
I'm going to flip this back into context quickly. Back into context, right? Okay. Now, look, there was a story on Sky News recently about they said, I mean, we started off this conversation talking about corruption in the Met, and Sky said, right, there's over 200 serving police officers in the UK currently have convictions for criminal offences, including assault, burglary, drug possession, or animal cruelty. Right now, as you know, I'm a sucker for animals, so I can't forgive the animal cruelty side. But in the landscape of all of this, I mean, I think the actual number is like 211, right? And I think there was a bit of backwards and forwards because, like, not every county disclosed their figures under the Freedom of Information Act or whatever. But okay, in the landscape of how many people are actually in the Met, you know,
was this within the Met, or was this within all of the police?
In all of the police, in all the
all
police,
right, so not just the Met, in the whole police. Right, okay.
You know, the PCSOs and everything, right? That's not actually that many.
Right. Let's give some figures to it. There's 120,000 police officers in England, Wales, and Scotland. Put the Irish on top of the Northern Ireland, of course, which is part of. So that's Great Britain. England, Scotland, Wales is Great Britain. And then if you put Northern Ireland in, which is the United Kingdom of Great Britain, Northern Ireland, then of course you've got another 10,000, approximately 7,000 to 10,000. That's before you start mentioning PCSOs, because they start saying about PCSOs. That's before you start mentioning the police family, right, which is the civilians, because when they start giving you these figures, they're not just talking about officers.
Yeah,
this is what people always forget.
We're
so in the Met alone,
it's 211 crimes that shouldn't have been committed, but in the grand scheme of things, in terms of numbers, right? But okay, to go back to my original point, just this week, okay, you know when I said, okay, I've pulled out some words from headlines describing the police and the media. Just this week, okay, here's a few headlines. Suffolk officer in court on GBH charge. Police officer dismissed for gross misconduct. Former Yorkshire police officer abused his position for sexual purpose. Devon and Cornwall police officer would have been dismissed for inappropriate relationship. Yorkshire police officer abused his position for a sexual purpose. Officer sent inappropriate messages to vulnerable women. Allegations against officer of inappropriate relationship with women in Devon and Cornwall. Former Kent police PCSO sentenced for misconduct in public office. Blah blah blah. Right? You know, that's this week.
So what
in the media?
In the media. But what are the offences? You've read out what they are. But what have they done?
Exactly.
So let me give you a good example.
Go into all of this, but the bigger question here, right? The big question here is, you know, the media pick up on all of these things because you know what we're hypothesizing here is that they want to build this picture where the police are the enemy, and it's weird, isn't it? I mean, like, okay, to be really flippant, to be completely flippant, there's this film, this document. Well, it's not really a documentary. It's a completely trashy Netflix film called My Policeman. Right, it stars Harry Styles. Right, so you can imagine I'm saying, I'm like, Anyway, there's a line, and it's all about his forbidden romance as a 1950s cop or whatever. Anyway, like I was bored. I was on Netflix, right? Anyway, there is one poignant line in it where he says, why do people fear the police? Because it's the criminals you should be afraid of. Right, and to state the bloody obvious, do you know what I mean? But there's sort of an inherent fear of the police that's come about for lots of reasons, and as I say, I mean, these are just our opinions and we are just sort of bandying them about, but I do find it really interesting. The role that the media's played and the role that TV plays in all of this. I mean, one thing I would say is look, okay. I know you love I know you love Line of Duty, and Vicky McClure, if you're listening to this, we'd love to have you on as a guest. But we've always chatted about the use of force and the use of weapons and what in context of TV shows. Now, I know there are 11 billion police and spy representations on TV, but I know in particular on Line of Duty, you said to me at the start, that unit would not have had access to those weapons.
I'm very anti it.
In the first place,
I'm very anti it in general. I'm not anti the actors. I'm very anti the concept because people take it as real. And I need to jump in there because when I asked you previously about what these officers done, what I'm saying that is, and I'll explain why I'm saying that. Right. First and foremost, what seems to now be happening is that police who carry out the laws, because that's all basically police do, is carry out the order of the laws, are held to a higher regard than the people who actually make the laws, who are politicians. So for what you're mentioning in terms of person goes out and does this, person goes out and does that, I could name you 15, 20 politicians right now who are still serving as politicians who've done what the police are thrown out for. Right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't get thrown out.
Mm.
Do you see what I mean? Because what
we've now added a whole new dimension to this argument. I love it.
Exactly. So incorrect behaviour. So, right, let's look at what they're saying. They're saying you're a police officer serving, you're married, and you see somebody else. They're saying incorrect behaviour. Well, so did the Prime Minister. And not just one of them, right? Not just the last one. Practically every one of them, right? So let's put that in context, right? Now let's look at things like doing things that are against regulations. We've got a Home Secretary who's done something against regulations. The previous Home Secretary went to the State of Israel and had meetings with the Israelis without any authorization. And you could not get a more aggressive intelligence service than the Mossad. So when you turn up and actually go to the Israelis, when you're supposed to be on holiday, and next minute you're talking to who knows what happened, right?
Mm.
We're talking about politicians seeing well-connected Russians with the FSB, which is now the forerunner of the KGB, the internal organisation FSB, right? We're talking about a foreign secretary, right? Head of our foreign service, head of MI6 by virtue of that, right? Who ditches his protection team, right? And goes to a party in Italy, right? Run by the son of an FSB officer, right? And then comes back fully drunk. And you know who the guy is because he later becomes Prime Minister, right? Now, if that's an officer doing that, he's thrown out. Do you get what I'm saying? That would be one of the cases I could go on and on and on. And if you want to do it in a different direction, officer kills somebody. I can only think of one up to now at present, that idiot they had. But you get doctors like Shipman who kill 124 people, known about. Some people estimate up to 500 people that he's killed. And I don't hear people saying never trust a doctor. I see a nurse.
Well, there is that. Okay. Well, that's a really good point as well. That is a really good point, because look at the way that the media portrays the NHS right now. Yes. You know that they're, but at the end of the day, if your person on the street is much more likely to trust that NHS nurse that we all painted the rainbows on our windows for and clapped on our doorstep, then trust the police who's trying to protect them from.
But it's worse than that, my friend. It's worse than that, Fergus. You know what it is this: the NHS, and I can tell you now, I know of about 7 trials in the last 5 years of nurses who have killed people wantonly. Not just one guy random, but who kill people. I know doctors who's written their initials on people's bloody spleens or breasts or whatever else. I know, as I said to you, there's a doctor there we're talking about who's murdered 124 known and maybe up to 500 not known. Other doctors have done that. They've come out in the cases. What I don't see is the head of the BMA or the head of the nurses union stand up and say, "Oh, outrageous! This was terrible. We will hang and drawn and quarter this fella." And if you don't trust the doctor, then go and see the commissioner. I mean, the commissioner said, if you don't trust the policeman, wave down a bus driver. I mean, what?
Yeah, exactly. But also,
does a doctor say?
So all those buzzwords that I started off this conversation with, like bent and liar and paedophile and murderer and killer and all the rest of it. Exactly. You don't find those words attached in the media to NHS nurse.
Absolutely, you don't. Absolutely, and they're killing babies. So my question is, Does it matter about babies? And more importantly, these are people who we allow to do the most terrifying things to. So we've all had injections, right?
Yeah.
All of us have had injections. These people are putting stuff in our arm and we don't know what it is.
Well, yes.
We don't know what it is. So they could be killing people. We don't know what it is.
That is a whole other episode. And if any of your listeners are going, oh my God, Carlton does care about babies, it's all right. It's okay.
No, I do, but it seems as though the media doesn't. See, this is my point with the media. It seems as though the media doesn't care about babies.
All right. So in yeah, I mean, like, okay, if I was going to be a conspiracy theorist, which I'm getting better at now, but if you were going to murder in plain sight, you might as well do it in a hospital, mightn't you? Because but you know, like, as opposed to, like, I mean, if you look at someone like Wayne Couzens, right, the Sarah Everard murder, right, you know, the like, in the nicest possible way, but the effort that he went to, I mean, obviously, you know, there was, like, he hired a car. He got her under false pretenses. He got her in the car. He drove, like, you know, a long way. He murdered her. He put her in a fridge. He torched the fridge. He then went out and bought some bags to cover her over. Like, then, you know, disposed of the body in a different place, and, you know, and then they found her anyway. You know, as opposed to if you work in the NHS and you bump someone off and they just take them down.
And the chances of you being caught are very, very slim.
but
let's be realistic.
Yeah, let's be realistic. Let's be happy. Let's be let's be positive. No, I mean, I think this is a real issue. You know, I think it's a real issue. But
your media wants to hammer the one police officer they know have done that, but says nothing about doctors and nurses. We've got a nurse on trial right now. You're saying hardly anything about her. You're not blaming all nurses, are you? You're just saying.
Of course not. Of course not. But let me throw back a commonality here, right? And you, because you've been on the police side, and because you've been on the MI6 side, and you know, let's just hypothesize the rest of it, right? Let's talk about the mental health element. You know, is there a point when I mean, okay, like, there was a. Gosh, what was his name? He's Stephen something. There was a police officer who was like the hero of the 2005 London Underground thing. Stephen something.
Okay. Yeah.
Let me just find his name quickly, just so that we're you know, making, you know, we're referencing the right person. What's he called? Stephen Cloney, right?
Okay.
He was, like, in 2005 he was a total hero, and then in, like, 2020 or something he was arrested for corruption, because for the last, you know, for the 15 years in between, pretty much, he'd been, like, selling police secrets, he'd been, you know, tipping off drug gangs, he'd been doing all the rest of it, and in the end he went to prison, but as you should do. But yeah, as you should do. But even Wayne Couzens, you know, said, like, you know, albeit after he'd kidnapped and murdered Sarah Everard, but he said that he took the day off work, but he handed in his gun, he handed in all his firearms. He said, you know, and then after that he handed.
Well, you
in
have to do that every. You have to do that every day. So you don't. In the old days, he said
he didn't want to carry a firearm anymore.
Right. Okay. I hear what you're saying. You're saying he didn't want to have the authority to carry it.
Where I'm going with this, Carlton, is you know, are all these rogue, you know, service officers in whatever capacity going rogue because there isn't enough mental health provision?
This question we will answer next week when we continue with this week's question about the difference between the cops and spooks and why they're treated so differently. So we'll see you again next week.
Take care.
See you next week, guys.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy Podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for free.
Here is a working class spy telling his stories, the secrets, the lives of spies. Feel free to message Carlton King on all socials and give this show 5 stars on Apple iTunes and subscribe so you never miss a single episode. For your ears only.
I was a member of Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service.